as we go along, but I know that your time is very precious, so we want to really jump into this and really think we have a great webinar for you today. So much more about machine learning and artificial intelligence, words that we keep hearing in the news and inside higher ed that possibly could be, not possible, be affecting our institutions and our students. My name is Tim Wilson. I'm the director of the Bellwether College Consortium. And the Bellwether College Consortium is an innovative partnerships of colleges that looks at the best practices for our community colleges in the areas of instructional programs and services, governance and finance, and workforce development. We do applied research for our colleges. We provide access to these best practices because our goal with these best practices is to replicate and scale them, at other institutions. We do external evaluations for our members, such as program evaluation as well as evaluation for grants. And we do several of this through our Community College Futures Assembly, which you may have heard of, which will be happening in January, where we have colleges coming to compete for the Bellwether Award in areas of workforce, instructional programs, and planning, governance, and finance. In addition, we also have a policy summit that occurs right before that. This year, we are very excited in our policy summit to look at the adult learner of ways to recruit, retain, really foster an adult learner-centered institution and look at policies and programs. We'll be partnering with such organizations as the Council for Adult Education and Learning, Community College America, and the National Council of Community College State Directors. In addition to all that, one of the things we're also very excited about is we really try to partner with innovative companies to provide solutions to our colleges in areas, such as institutional effectiveness, student success, and other critical areas that are affecting our colleges. And today we are very excited to have Tanjo here to talk about just the possible solutions with artificial intelligence for your institutions and for your students. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Richard Boyd, who is the CEO of Tanjo. Richard is a serial entrepreneur who is most recently the director of the Virtual World Labs for the aerospace giant Lockheed Martin, who he joined in 2007, where they acquired 3D Solve, where Richard was CEO and co-founder. Prior to that, Richard was the CEO. Prior to that, Richard was a spin-out of Virtual Corporation, where he served for a decade on the executive management team that created several pioneering computer gaming companies, including Red Storm Entertainment with author Tom Clancy, iRock Entertainment with Ozzy Osbourne, and Timeline Computer Entertainment with author Michael Crichton. Without further ado, Richard, thank you for being here, and I'm going to turn it to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate everybody spending your post-Halloween time with us on a Thursday afternoon. I'm very excited about this topic. This is something that we've been very interested in for quite some time, and again, appreciate all the attention. I'll note, as you hopefully see on your screen there, that I'll be joined by my CTO, Ken Lane. Ken and I have worked together for a little bit over a decade. Say hi, Ken.
Hi there, everyone.
Ken and I work together in all that gaming and motion picture stuff, which you saw there. When at Lockheed, he was actually Technologist of the Year at esteemed 100-year company with over 100,000 people in it. So I hope we brought enough intellect to bear with all the very smart people on the phone today, and hope we'll get a lot to think about. Now, the way we're going to carve up today this session is we're going to talk first about machine learning and make sure that everybody understands, what it is, and we're going to go a little bit deeper, and that's why I asked Ken to join me, because in some of the other conversations we've had with other higher ed folks recently, there's been an appetite for a little depth into how it actually works, and even things like, what sort of courses could you teach in schools to prepare people for using this kind of technology. Hopefully, we won't go too deep, but we'll definitely give you some depth here, and then we'll pause right after that for some questions around machine learning in general, and then we're going to go right into applications, things you can do today and apply today to really give you a leg up on on performance and student success, and really applying the technologies here. All right. Again, this is kind of our background slide. We do come to this field of machine learning from an unusual perspective, but I think perspective, as Alan Kay says, is worth 80 IQ points. So hopefully, again, that's enough to measure up for you guys. In gaming, of course, artificial intelligence has always been an important aspect of that. If you want to have convincing characters and convincing environments, you need to master that technology. That's definitely been in our DNA for over 2 decades. Red Storm Entertainment is where most people know us from, the esteemed, Tom Clancy franchise. But this machine learning stuff we're talking about today is a whole new ballgame, a whole new way to approach this balance of humans and machines working together, and that's our subject today. Again, when we were at Lockheed, we dealt with a lot of different technologies, everything from working in simulations in outer space and how to build simulated hospitals and apply combinations of technologies, including VR, AR, and AI to that environment. And see one example in there, hopefully I see it on the left, where we were actually building better ways to begin to harness these technologies for education, going back about 8 or 9 years. We'll talk about some of that, but again, the focus today will be on machine learning. About first, just generally what it is. If you were all sitting in front of me today, I would ask you to raise your hands to see what people think it is. We tried to provide just some very simple orienting definitions here about what it is and why it's different. Artificial intelligence is getting a lot of attention in the press, good and bad, positive and negative. But the best thing to do in order to orient the discussion today is focus in on this machine learning, which is one element or one area of study within artificial intelligence. And what's unique about it is just its ability to improve itself. That's the idea I want you to sort of think about as we go through this session. A really easy way to think of it is just a self-improving database. So every time it finds a better example of something, it replaces that new, better example in its database, and it never forgets. Think about our job as educators, which is to embed information in human brains. That's really what we're trying to do. And, of course, humans aren't machines. But machine learning is interesting in that it can work just as humans have to with incomplete knowledge and just continue to try to make it slightly better with examples and encounters in the real world. I see a lot of examples of these, and we'll focus in on a couple of them. Problem that then the sort of canonical problem for machine learning. I hope some of you recognize the little image on the right. It's we gave it away with the little image at the top of Indiana Jones there. The idea here is that at the end of that movie, they have this incredibly powerful item, the Ark of the Covenant, and at the end, this thing can either save or destroy the planet. And if a clerk is putting a tag on it that says Ark thingy, and it's putting it in this massive database. And this is the important point to take away here is, we have big data today. There's a big difference or big leap between big data and usable information, and another big leap between information and intelligence. Of course, is the business we're in education, is trying to achieve intelligence, which is taking information and having a human perform an operation on it, or a machine perform an operation on it in order to derive intelligence from it. Now, the first thing we did when we were at Lockheed was Arne Duncan, the Secretary of Education at the time, said, hey, we have this really interesting problem. We have a lot of information that the federal government has access to, yet is undiscoverable by teachers. We'd love to make this accessible to everybody out there so they can use it. The example we first worked with was that the Smithsonian Institution, of course, has a lot of information they've been collecting over the years, pottery shards and artifacts from archaeological digs, as well as documents and all sorts of things. And of course, a lot of this was collected before we had the internet. And we're trying to figure out how to make it take out of this warehouse where they have it in the catacombs, I suppose, below the Smithsonian, make it accessible and discoverable so people could use it. So they were using humans to go through and look at something and tag it. And what we did, and this is one of the early uses of machine learning, we used machine learning to read something or look at an image of something, and then if the machine learning brain already understood what it was, it would go ahead and tag it and then make it so that it's accessible by educators. If it didn't know what it was or didn't have a certain confidence level, like above, let's say, 60%, then if you guys saw IBM Watson playing Jeopardy a couple of years ago, where it was throwing up the answers that it thought were accurate, and it had a sort of percent certainty score next to each one, this works the same way. And if it's not above a certain level, a certain threshold, then it would present it to a human expert who would then say, yes, you got that right, or no, you got it wrong, and here's actually what it is. And of course, then it updates its database and never forgets. And that's the secret power of machine learning, or one of them. All right? So here's another really interesting thing about machine learning. It can read real fast. As we here at Tanjo, we're beginning to work with folks in the professional fields like architecture and accounting and law, we started wielding these powers. So one of the early things that we did a couple of years ago is machine learning brain read every single legal opinion in United States history. And like, wow, that's amazingly daunting, and it was, because it's across 417 districts. It's over almost 4 million opinions, and each of these opinions could be 1,000 pages. So massive. But that's what machines are good at: reading it, understanding it, and being able to map it, and then essentially solve previously an unsolvable search problem. And it understands not just keywords, but it actually understands the concepts within it. So again, think about that in terms of the kinds of information that people at your institution are working with, best practices and curricula and original source research, all this information. And how do you launch it and form it in a way that machines can help humans take advantage of it really quickly? That's something this is really good at. I think my colleague is just reminding me that I got to mention that the output of this project that we did here with the Department of Education was called the Learning Registry, which is still being used today across K through 21 and beyond, I believe. So just if you're paying attention to that. Now here's the big thesis statement. Every thing like this needs that. Our thesis is that this century, the most important thing to get right is this balance between humans and machines to optimize outcomes. I wrote an article that you can find on TechCrunch about that a couple of years ago, and I expanded those concepts a little more specifically around that same time within education in an article I wrote called Superhuman Education, and some follow-on articles that you will find on the Getting Smart website. And that's, again, we'll be talking about some of those ideas here today. But this is the general thing. Time when if you were, and I'm on the board of trustees, by the way, of a community college here in North Carolina called Wake Technical College that has about 70,000 students in it every year. So I'm pretty with some of the complexity all of you are dealing with. And, one of the things we look at is anytime you're looking for a new function, something that you want to get done in the organization, in the old, we would just go down to HR and say, hey, I need, a new campus security officer, or I need someone to teach physics, or I need, whatever that item is. Today, we need to look at every request like that and say, all right, how much of that is a human effort project, and how much of that could be automated? What is the right balance of those things? And it's a new skill and a new sort of way to do everything that needs to get done within your organization. And again, our thought here is that anyone who gets that right is going to be successful and competitive, and those who do not will not be so competitive and even end up looking handicapped. So just one general provocative thought that I want to plant for you. I just want to talk just quickly about how we got a little more rigid on machine learning and give you some examples just to reinforce these ideas we've been talking about. At a conference recently, and I talked about 2009 is my Zelig year. I don't know if that's resonating with you guys. I was in New York speaking at the New York Stock Exchange, and I thought, well, everybody knows Woody Allen in New York, right? But I saw a lot of blank stares from the younger folks. So I end up saying Forrest Gump. Everyone's like, oh, I get it now. I'm saying that in the year I was in a lot of places, like on the set of Avatar, being able to see the very first quantum computer, and a bunch of different places where some really pivotal things were happening in technology. And I want to talk about one or two of them with you right here. So first one, machine learning examples that already might be in your house. We have today things like Siri and Alexa, but I encountered this first in 2009. I was at Microsoft Research, and the picture you see of me there in the middle, on my right shoulder is Alex Kipman, the guy who won Inventor of the Year with Popular Science for the Microsoft Kinect. At the time, it was called Microsoft Natal. And on my left shoulder is Jaron Lanier. He's the guy who came up with the term virtual reality. So I was there to help them look at the sensors with my colleague David Smith, but I ended up getting fascinated by something else. And the problem that is they shipped Microsoft Xboxes all over the world, and they only had about 100 megabytes of space available on those systems. And so they had to do is teach the system what a living room was, so that the sensors could recognize and tell the difference between a cat and a dog, and a plant and a lamp, and a chair and a table and a sofa, in between individual human beings. Now that sounds, again, really simple for us to understand, but it was computationally complex for machines at that time, and that wasn't that long ago. Back then, we would never ask ask a computer to do anything that we didn't fully understand. It could break down into logic that we could give the logic, sort of out. And learning is a whole new way of looking at things. Instead of creating algorithms that describe how something is done, like how do you recognize in different light, what's the difference between a chair and a table and all these different things. Instead, what you do with machine learning is you give it every possible example. And that's what they were doing. They were using a supercomputer and every example of every living room around the world. So an urban one versus a rural living room look like? What does a Japanese versus an Italian living room look like? By having enough examples, millions of examples, without me even trying to sit down and write down the rules, the machine was able to infer its own rule set, came up with a rule set that was less than 100 megs, so it fit within the Xboxes, and this was a huge success. And that was the sort of aha moment for us that, hey, this changes everything. And aside, and I don't have a slide on this, but think about autonomous vehicles to the biggest beneficiaries of machine learning. Back in 2004, when DARPA was doing its work on that and had the DARPA challenge for autonomous vehicles, they saw that footage. The vehicles were, make it 100 yards across a desert before they hit a rock or lost their signal. And that was because we were doing it the old way of, I know how to drive a car. I'm going to tell the machine how to do it, and I'm going to write in all these rules. Well, machine, we don't really know how we drive cars. I mean, driving a car is mostly about ignoring all of the sensory data around you. If you look at attention to everything around you, you'll crash. And machines drive differently. They don't have 2 feet, 2 hands, 2 eyes. They've got, optic sensors, LiDAR, radar, GPS, all these sort of inputs and outputs that humans don't have. So instead of, write down those rules, the breakthrough with machine learning, where now all you have to do is have a good machine learning system, watch 100 hours of video examples, and it can go out on the road and drive flawlessly. So that's the huge, huge titanic breakthrough, and that's what we want to do for you guys as well. Some other examples, very quickly, that came from, let's say, 2010 or so, where we had Google invested in the DeepMind system, and the first thing they did is had it learn to play Atari games. So there's with Neil Bushnell, the founder of Atari, also the founder of Chuck E. Cheese, by the way, because he needed somewhere to put his Pac-Man and all the different games. They just had the machine watch humans play these games, and then it could infer its own rule set, and then got really good really fast. The 2 years ago was when people said, one thing to have a machine beat a human at chess, that seems pretty, bound by the complexity of it. It's not that complex, but everyone thought it would be decades before a machine can beat anybody at Go. And that happened 2 years ago. So that was a big watershed, huge moment. It's getting even more interesting as we go here. So I've been this slide for a while saying, okay, now that we see it can do a human at Go where there's a lot of diplomacy and intuition and deceit, when are they going to learn to lie to us and win at things that require lying, like poker, right? As we learned, this just happened at Carnegie Mellon University at the beginning of 2017, where a machine learning system put together there at the university beat all the top Texas Hold'em poker players in the world. And I'm running this just to make sure you're all paying attention, because this is happening very fast and we can't ignore it and be, like I said, competitive and successful today. We need to be thinking about ways to employ this technology, a organization, to get that human-machine balance right. So I'm very quickly here to my colleague Ken to go into a little bit more depth about the machine technologies, and then we'll take some questions from you on the first stage of the session here.
Hi, I'm Ken. So this slide of what the purpose here is to try and list the generic types of machine learning. And if you kind of walk them through these, you get this kind of understanding of the combination of examples of those studies, and then the underlying type of capability on the right there. So on the right, we're looking at voice recognition, voice synthesis, natural language processing. You've come across some of these things, processing. Then those technologies get used, either one or several of them in combination, are created together, and those technologies are then used to generate these applications. The fun thing that Richard has been talking about plenty is that you don't necessarily have to fully understand the problem that you're solving. I always like to say that the scientific method's got an upgrade, and there's a new button on the calculator now. Anyone out there who's got a little bit of a statistics background maybe remembers making chi-square analysis and doing linear regression. They're extremely powerful things for finding patterns and acting on behalf of those. The kind of capability that has been able to bring to pass has been profound. The problem was that it couldn't be, that kind of super tech couldn't be applied in human domain spaces. Machine changes that and allows us to take problems that are hugely more complex, hyperdimensionally complex, and to end up with these regressions and chi-square analysis and statistical analyses that are learning from the examples that you feed into them and generating a hyperdimensional solution to whatever problem set you feed in. And all of these domains that you're seeing listed here make use of this same set of magic tricks in mathematics that are going to allow us to continue to apply machine learning in areas that everyone thought was going to be years, decades before we could even attempt it. Okay. This slide is an excellent one to kind of begin the thought process for yourselves. Think about criteria that would help you come up with problems that you're dealing with. Machine learning could be helpful in helping you crack them. You have a massive set of data that you wish you could discover the patterns in, but you don't know what hypothesis you should apply that data. Learning steps in and says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a ranked list of every one of the hypotheses in order of which is the most true, and the human's job is to walk down through all those known to be true hypotheses and which of those are actionable, useful, that humans can wrap their heads around and do things about. In having to come up with the hypothesis, old school scientific method, and test those one by one by one, having a list of pre-known to be true hypotheses allows a completely different way of approaching the scientific method. So that if you have a giant data set and you don't know what patterns to look for, what machine learning can help you do. You can kind of walk down through that list. What if you want something to be a matter automatically tag? What if you want something to be automatically classified? What if you curate and discover knowledge and collaborate with a large group of people with that knowledge in the middle automatically arranged into a hierarchical taxonomy? If you do statistical analysis so far, you wish you had a fancy way of doing that without having to manually come up with the hypotheses each time. If you're thinking about problems that have large amounts of data in your experience, all of those can benefit from machine learning, automation, and analysis techniques. This is a slide where I have to behave myself and not talk too long. I'll briefly talk about the hierarchy here. You see how you've got artificial intelligence is made up of two flavors: handcrafted AI. So it's whenever you hear AI in the past, this is what has been meant. Machine learning is so different from that type of AI. It's the other half of what AI is. It's the kind of AI that learns on its own. We've talked about that a fair amount. Two additional flavors. I'll call them orange and green, just to keep it safe and simple. Supervised machine learning, you have lots of training sets. Unsupervised, the green down there, it finds all of the correlations for you. That's that upgraded scientific method we've been talking about. So orange is you train it and it becomes capable of, you give it a goal. And the green down here is it's going to find all of those correlations for you. You don't have to come up with what patterns you are trying to train it on in the first place. It will find them for you. I'm talking a little more detail about the orange flavor. If you've heard of neural networks, the technology that they're tapping into, this is my life in college, is I was doing neuroscience and brain surgery, laboratory brain surgery, and trying to understand neurons. And some of the early work in simulation of neurons, we're harnessing the power of the way that actual brains work. And wiring them together mathematically to create simulations. That Cray diagram in the bottom left is right to that real neuron because it's a mathematical representation of the way that real neurons work. And you can arrange them in clusters that are incredibly complex, not as complex as people's brains, but certainly to solve all sorts of problems that we didn't know were possible.
Okay.
This is, again, talking about how that applies to self-driving cars, and you see on the right, you've got the diagram of the neurons. This is a great slide to kind of describe the green flavor, the upgrade to the scientific method. On the left, iterating over and over on each of the hypotheses, one at a time. On the you simultaneously generate a list of all true hypotheses in a single step. And then up to you to decide which of those are useful. Humans, sometimes the results can be so complex. Even though they're absolutely the most true thing, it's kind of beyond human understanding to know why that's the case, and it's hard to act in those cases. The job is inverted. What requires effort? This is something that maybe Richard, would you like to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, we're going to get into this in a little more depth, so this is almost out of order, but one of the things that's interesting about how machines look at the information space is they'll look at data streaming out of, that's being created in terms of like text content and video and that sort of thing, or sensory data, but it looks at the data streams, the data exhausts coming off of us as humans, and doesn't differentiate between the two. It just says, oh, here's a bunch of data. How do I make sense out of this? And it can make sense out of people. So you can model people very, very carefully. And again, as a group of folks who've been very interested in education and trying to shorten the path to mastery for a variety of things, whether it's, I showed earlier, working in a hospital environment or flying an aircraft or learning algebra, understanding first the state and the model of the person you're dealing with is a teacher knows that's really incredibly important. If you can tailor how you talk to them and how you present data and how the frequency of it, the intensity curve of it, you can get a shorter path to mastery and a better outcome, that sort of 2 sigma outcome we're all looking for. So just take this image in that vein, and we'll get into that in a little more depth here in a second. We're at our questions break, and again, I just wanted to make sure no one's like going off the reservation here and everybody's on the same page. And so just let us know if there are any questions about machine learning, and hopefully now everybody at least can have at cocktail parties, if you save this or the video of it, about being able to hold forth on what machine learning is. So it's questions. All right, put them in the chat window if you have them. I don't see any, and I'm going to wait for like another 10 seconds, and I'm moving forward. At the bottom here. Okay, so I'm going to move forward.
I have a question that just came in. It looks like it went to me. For those already familiar with machine learning, are you going to go over more specific applications to community colleges?
Yes, that's exactly what that's what the rest of our little journey today is all about, is specific applications you can use today. These isn't like future speak or things you might see in the fuzzy, cloudy future. This is what you can do right now and that other people are doing right now. That's what we're getting into here.
Perfect.
All right. Yeah, great question and timely one. So this is, I don't know how many of you have ever read this book, The Diamond Age. This came out sometime in the 90s, I guess. And, of course, the guy I'm standing next to there came out sometime way before that. That's Alan Kay, the guy at Xerox PARC who invented the first laptop computer and invented, his group helped invent the mouse and the Windows interface, and that's how Steve Jobs got the Windows interface and ended up becoming the Macintosh. So he's a guy I try to stay close to because he's brilliant and he's got a deep, abiding interest in education. He's the person who they modeled. His wife is the person who wrote the book Tron and the screenplay Tron, and he's actually Tron, so that's cool. But in the Diamond Age, there's this idea of the Young Ladies Illustrated Primer, or I guess if you're English. And the idea there is if you could have a device that's all-knowing, all-sentient, and even has human participants attached to it, you know, your tutors, intelligent tutors, or even real people who are experts, then you could really shorten the path to mastery for a child, and that's what happens in this book. So that idea has really been sort of thrown in the head of everyone, and I'll be talking about this, by the way, at a South by Southwest half-day session, which I'll be sending all of you who are interested information on that's coming up this year at South by Southwest. The idea of, again, the balance between a device to a person for truly personalized learning. And you can see some of his sketches on the left for the first laptop. He wasn't about business workers. He was thinking about kids and how can we actually help them collaborate and learn better. And he was also behind, of course, the one laptop per child. So that's one of the guiding ideas that we use when we're about how to apply machine learning, and one of the good examples. So here are my opportunities for right now. Like, first of all, or you can call them problems, let's just call them opportunities, is how to really achieve personalized learning. Like we talked about that for some time. And we know that if you want to get the best result for education, one-on-one tutoring by an expert teacher who's skilled in that is the way to get that shortest path to mastery. So how to do that using technology and the time and attention available with students, given that teachers have these student-to-teacher ratios they're having to deal with. They don't get one-on-one full-time with every student. It's just not possible. So amplify or make, as I said in my article earlier, how do we make teachers superhuman? So we're going to dig into that. The other, how do we, as teams of people in an education institution, learn faster, better as the world around us is changing, as complexity increases? Because when I looked, it's only going in one direction. It's not getting simpler, right? It's getting more complex. We as educators and administrators harness machine intelligence to make sure we can provide the best personalized learning, that information, and teach kids how to learn, or even adults how to learn faster, to make sure they can adapt to the rapid changing environment around them. As Alvin Toffler once said in Future Shock, you know, the illiterate of the century aren't people who can't read and write, but people who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn very quickly. And I believe that's why I'm on the board of trustees of a community college, because I think that community colleges are really set up to perform this function of training people really quickly. Then student success. We always talk about this. Student success has a lot of factors. The ability to, balance, sometimes, home and kids and even maybe another work life together with the training you're trying to get at a community college. Most of our 70,000 students at Tech are part-time students, right? So how can you use intelligent systems to help them have a uniform and quality experience? And then, like I said, the central skills. How do you look at every function within your institution and determine, how much of that belongs, how much of that should have human attention and effort, and how much should be automated? And it turns out that bar is really sliding fast in terms of things that we do today to really let fewer people do a lot more, because that's what we're being asked to do, right? Do more with less. Everybody's saying that, and machine learning can help you do that. So an example, talk about personalized learning. First is, like I said, to model those people. So what if you could have a really detailed, Myers-Briggs like model of everybody that's going to be in your upcoming class, and be able to tailor the curriculum direct to each one of those people individually. So this is one of the things that we're doing. We reached out to some of the top folks in behavioral science. We just gave a Nobel Prize recently, I understand, to Richard Thaler, this field of behavior. But we're working with Dr. Richard Carson at UCal San Diego, with Dr. Jordan Lier from Australia, Tiago Ribeiro from Portugal, who all are sort of proteges of McFadden, who won another Nobel Prize in this field. And it's this idea of being able to actually use data to model human behavior. Once you have a good enough model, the machine learning system can derive, you put it into a simulation and practice teaching. Ken and I were at Lockheed. We built an actual virtual classroom where prospective students could come in and practice managing classroom situations and dealing with all the different archetypal personalities and different, intelligence levels and all that. And by doing that, many of them figured out, our son figured out, like, hey, maybe this isn't for me, right? Because it does take a certain kind of emotional cue and aptitude to be a teacher. So there's all kinds of interesting things we do, but I'll just tell you how we do this. So I said, with machine learning, it can take data. So if I have your Facebook interest graph, your LinkedIn information, or anything else I can get, or writing samples, I can build a model of you. Model, because, we have to be careful about personally identified information. That can be an abstract from you, and you can use that in a lot of interesting ways. But here's one example. One of the first things we did about a little over a year ago was gave birth to, or rebirth, I should say, to Victor Hugo. And a machine learning system can read really quickly, so read everything that's ever been written by Victor Hugo, and also read everything written about Victor Hugo, because there was a lot of content, and it was able to construct this sort of model of him. The first thing we did that you see here is we released it on the internet and let Victor Hugo read, and we get to see every day what attracts his attention, what does he care about, and he scores everything that he reads. And we learned a lot about him. The thing we did George Washington, we did Martin Luther King Jr. You can do this with just about everything. This is just phase one, by the way, is being able to watch that person and understand them better. Try to build some empathy about, who is this person? Who's this student? Who's this person I'm going to have to deal with? The next thing to do is give them samples, and I'm giving you a marketing example here, but this could just as easily be anything out of your, lessons or items that they have to read and that sort of thing. You'd be able to see, is this above or below their reading level? Does this conform with sentiment? Is it turned off by it? Is it too complex? In this case, every time I give something in writing to these entities, these bots, as we call them here, or personas is what we call them, animated personas, I see how they react to it, and I can hone my messaging in to figure out how to get them to respond better. So what it is using this in marketing. So how do you market attract students to your college? Well, that's one of the classic things here is like, how do I reach out to those different people I want to attract? Let's say I'm looking for nursing students for my nursing program. Find them, how do I speak to them to get them to consider coming to my school versus another one? And the tool for doing that, and this is one of the new tools that people are beginning to use. And the idea here is you've got several levels of this. As I said earlier, with machine learning, it can work with incomplete data. So if I have, demographics about who Donna is, even though at 20%, I can start doing some interesting things, like what I was doing with Vic Hugo, and sort of see like what is she interested in? What kinds of content and places, what would you prefer to spend her attention? If I had a bit more information, let's say from social media and that sort of thing, I can build and have more of a psychographic model of her and how she responds to different learning styles or different curricula that I might propose to her. What kinds of teams of people should she in learn more effectively if you're making study groups and that kind of thing. Beyond that, with a little bit of a questionnaire, a little bit more data, you can get to personality and sentiment, and then now it starts really coming alive. And then the top level there is behavior and choice model. If I can have enough data about that, then I can put all of my 70,000 students in a simulation and test out ideas about how I can make everything function better, make sure everybody's happy and they're most effective. And you can do this with the organization, by the way. This is the new HR sort of idea that is standing on the shoulders for on social media and that sort of thing. And then I always like to say that there's a percentage that's unknowable because humans don't always follow, their graphs and their state, because we change state all the time. But these are tools we've never had before, and tools that you're among the very few who are exposed to this in the higher education world. So again, congratulations on that, and have fun with that at cocktail parties. But hopefully we'll be able to implement it well. One creative example of this, I mentioned being able to resurrect Victor Hugo. We did Ernest Hemingway, Dostoevsky, Mark Twain, Charles Bukowski. There's a website, a webzine where they publish people's fiction. They were trying to see, how they field all the different submissions they get with the number of editors they have. And what they have is humans can only read so much, right? So now our editors can actually read and score them from their perspective. So obviously, if I write a science fiction short story, then maybe Asimov might really like it, but Mark Twain might not care for it. But they do other things like look at, grammar, scholarship level, sentiment, these other sort of factors, and then say them by saying, look, here are the things that you should pay attention to, and then the rest of these are all fine, or you should not look at any of these because they didn't pass muster in this case. And then here are the stories you should really get into a little deeper. About the flip of that in the classroom of saying, having the artificial intelligent editors with a certain understanding of content to read the first round of papers and do the first assessment, and then let the teacher, the editor, focus on those that need the most attention. So again, I'm just trying to provoke you with a couple of ideas that are real examples today. This is something of a personal note here, where my father died this year, and of course I couldn't help myself. I mean, it was sad that he passed, but he was 85 years old, great guy, very interesting guy, but he didn't have a Facebook account, he didn't have LinkedIn. I had to have the system read everything about him, read his letters, read his military records, and now I'm able to visit him every single day and see what he's interested in. And we didn't always agree on everything. Sometimes I almost find myself arguing with him. But again, just trying to provoke you with ideas. What if you could have a panel of people that are ancestors of yours, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, as well as Leonardo da Vinci and Martin Luther King or whoever, and every time you have an important decision in your school career or your life, you could ask these people questions from their perspective and get their advice. Just think about that. All right, here, let's talk about something more interesting here, or even deeper, is the idea of being able to have your own machine learning brain at your place that's under your control. That's how this works. You know, you've heard about IBM Watson. You've heard about some of these, like Google AlphaGo and these sorts of technologies. What we're trying to do and working together with Tim and the Bellwether Group is say, we believe we can apply this to organizations, as I said, both at the modeling of the people that were within, but also helping them collectively get smart faster than previous methods. So again, this idea of having the system read everything that all the curricula, all the information that around every subject that you're teaching at your school, as well as the best practices, have that be curated by your faculty and by your administrators. It becomes not just a good sort of story of all of your knowledge and how to get at it very quickly that solves the search problem, but it becomes really uniquely yours. So like another asset, another helper to make sure that whatever is known within your organization is known across all of it. Yeah, Ken.
Yeah, this is Ken. One of the ways that I like to frame this, imagine you had a folder, and whenever you saved something into that folder, whether it was a link or a Word doc or a PDF, imagine if that folder then would automatically fill with everything else that belongs in that folder. That technology does. Everything that belongs in that folder that is akin to the thing or things that you manually put into it, imagine that all the shortcuts automatically are placed in there. Those pieces of content, they could be things from the internet, they could be your own files, they could be things from throughout your organization or your larger organization. So imagine you start writing up a little a white paper or a treatise or a proposal, and you get about a half a paragraph in, and you go and save it. You notice your folder starts filling up with things that you've written before, akin to that, things that your colleagues have written before, things that your larger network of researchable compatriots have worked with before, and the web.
Yeah, we do that with code, right? I mean, if we are sitting down to write a new function in code, the first thing we do is that, has anybody else here already done something similar? And to prevent us from reproducing the same expense, the same cost of learning and recreating something when you could just use something else in an organization where it's already been done. So if I'm at WEC and I want to teach, 3D printing or robotics or VR or AR or any of these other newer technologies or machine learning, I would like to look across the organization, see who already is an expert in this, who already has curriculum they built, subject to permissions. I should be able to either have that person recommended to me or that content, so that rather than go to that extra time and expense of recreating it.
Well, then we've all done it. I'll sit there and I say, I've written something like this before. It'd be a lot more painful for me to go find it. So I'm going to sit here and write it again, and I do it. I write it again. But that's finally changed now. That's solved by bots that do writing of all of this stuff faster than is reasonable.
And because we can't help it, we're computer gamers by DNA, as I mentioned. We're even around with ideas. Instead of folders, you can actually have 3D interfaces. So imagine this is all of the knowledge collected across your campus. And each one of these nodes are different topic areas or areas of interest. And you actually click on things, or the system itself can navigate you around to show you where, and you can see and you see some people flying by there. Those are actually people moving between the data nodes, and you can kind of keep an eye on, how did information enter my organization? Where's the most active? And it would be by size, or it might, pulse a little bit to know that, hey, there's a lot of activity around 3D printing right now, or around Internet of Things, or data science, or whatever areas of most interest. And I can how did that information enter the organization, who championed it, who challenged it, and ultimately how did we decide to go with that curriculum or that approach as opposed to another. And just some interesting ideas to provoke you, but something we can do today. So again, you can also just use these simple mechanics that we have here today. We call this kind of like pinch for knowledge. So if I'm working on the subject of the fourth industrial revolution, let's say I'm teaching a class, I have this ability to create notes. Every time I create a note and put it in here, the bots read that and they update their understanding around the subject. I can also invite and collaborate with other people directly on this. And then I find something valuable, like a lesson plan or a piece of content or a video or, off an academy or whatever it happens to be that I found useful, I pin it here, and my collaborators can then go in and rate it and say, this was, I can slide this and say, this is really true or really accurate, and change these values so they make sense for you. And you can sort of measure anything. This is really relevant, not relevant, quality was high, complexity, scholarship. This will give you a really good, solid way with human and machine curation working together to curate what's most valuable within your organization. Really powerful stuff, really simple activity. I think that's the best technology design is combining those those very simple ideas, not making it too complex to use. And here's just some more examples where you can actually have things rated by sentiment, date, popularity, pin match, different ways to slice this. And these are customizable for the brain that you have. And we'll get into this in a second, but within this environment, you can also say around this content, let me assign some work to my students or to my faculty or whatever to work that information. And we can go to that a little more detail. The overall process, just if you're wondering, how do I get my own machine learning brain? The first thing to know is, what sort of sources do you have? So we've gone through this process with Wake Tech, and that, the way they store information, where are their lesson plans, curricula, that thing. But also within the library part of the organization, they subscribe to a lot of research paper repositories and that sort of thing. There's a possibility of creating specialized bots that can log in as the Perfect Tech with the authority go in and sort of categorize all that stuff as well, so that it can be available when people need it. So you get the most get the most of all the stuff that you paid for that you're subscribing to. So get all the sources understood, then we can design provide you essentially a clean brain that then ingests all of that stuff, begin to learn what's important to you and where the emphasis is for your school. And then you've got the brain. The brain is born, and we integrate it as deep as you want to see it implemented. If you're in a Microsoft Azure environment, or an Exchange environment, or you're using Google, or whatever it happens to be, we have experience integrating with each one of those. And then that activity that you saw of people in your organization, at WEC, there's 1,100 faculty members. As they work through content and pin it and rate stuff, it will just get better and better and better and be a more accurate representation of what that organization values. And to have your own brain, so it's not something you're subscribing to that's under someone else's control or that's general, that isn't specific to you. It's something that you can have on your organization. It becomes this sort of, like I said, enduring repository of everything that you know. And as you have faculty leave and that sort of thing, their knowledge and how they work with information will be enshrined within your company. I think in this information age, this is critical. So I want Ken to talk really quickly about Goalbot. I'm out of time, and make sure we have time to have questions, but we're really excited about this, how do you give a bot to a student and guide them through their entire journey through school?
Well, luckily we've talked about the same kind of technology throughout. That primer for the person who acts as an agent on the behalf of the student, but it isn't a bot that acting on the behalf of each of the students, but also is a multi-sided platform, is acting on the behalf of all of the stakeholders around that student, like the teachers who have a stake in that student's success, or the person that hire them later on and has a stake in what skills that they're obtaining right now. if you create a platform that makes it easy for folks to communicate with each other on an atomic basis, right? The task step-by-step act of being a student could be connected directly to those employers and other stakeholders who want to incentivize certain activity. Top left there, you know, GSK says there's a quiz tomorrow. If you go to the library to study with your friends from 6 to 7, we're going to give you $4. And we're trying to incentivize that type of behavior. And we put together a platform, just an application of this same technology, where you automate the back-end system where agency is being brought to bear on behalf of those students from the point of view of student success and all of the wider network of entities that will benefit and would like to influence the path of that success. That's the nutshell.
And the bot, again, would have this deep understanding of who you are, what your preferences are, what preference you have for different media types, and be able to recommend those things as your, not just what the teacher has provided you, but other things that might help you, again, have a shorter path to mastery in that subject. We're very interested in this idea and developing it further with anybody who's interested. Again, this is the thesis statement repeated for everybody, just to beat it in everybody's head, that I think this is so critical today, that this is important. Then here's a reading list if you're interested in delving into any of these subjects a little more deeply. This is where many of our ideas have come from. This is just a sample, of course, and I think that, again, this is all recorded, so you can go back and revisit this list when you're ready. And we really appreciate the time and look forward to seeing if there are questions in the time we have left, Tim.
So much, Richard and Ken, and very, very fascinating topic. I think it's very apropos of what the higher education landscape is facing and will continue to face. And I really love how you kind of did the overview as well as give some specific examples and not just walk away with those applicable with things that we can apply in our colleges. I also love the cocktail talk, so it gives us a little more information. I'm actually excited that I get to find out who Tron was based at. That's a get for me that I'm going to use it for cocktail parties for sure. But one question we got, and this is probably a question that was similar when the whole online learning environment was taking off, is the steps of automation, the effective automation, going to be a threat? That's a strong word, but how is it going to affect the teaching profession?
So this is Richard. I'll take that first because, again, if you read my Getting Smart article from a while back, I talk about superhuman education, and that's what we want to do is we make educators and administrators supermen by giving them these Batman-like powers. That's another we talk about here. Man's a superhero. What's his superpower? He doesn't have any. He just uses talent, and he's rich. Of course, it helps to be a billionaire and have toys. But that's what we want to do is give skills, these technology skills and powers and competencies to teachers so that they can amplify themselves. Because, again, we all know that there's no substitute for having someone who's both an expert in the subject but also a skilled educator and teacher who knows how to, again, tune into the personality and attention and frequency of that learner, whether they're adult or a child, and take them along that learning journey. So if we can somehow those successful, creative teachers to reach more people by again, anything with technology, that's the goal. And the other thing I'll say is, as part of this is, as people move through education and get out into the workforce, the workforce of the future absolutely is going to be one that's in tandem with automation. So those fluencies have to be as their own subject, like how to teach people to comfortably work with these technologies and to outsource the right things, the way we outsource we outsource today search. Anyone who's really adept at search appears to be more intelligent than anyone else. So that's an early skill, but very soon it's going to be other skills that, with your own personalized bots that are bringing you things just so you need them, like that Young Ladies Illustrated primer example, helping you do your job and your function better than a standalone human brain alone can do.
This is Ken. Talking about how much teaching is going to be necessary moving forward in the future. With the speed of technology increasing constantly, it's my premise that as technology makes it easier for people to get access to teachers out in the world, where the bar of gaining access to teachers gets lower, expectation is going to be that in the workplace, people are going to be tasked with going to school throughout their career. I think, if anything, this type of technology is going to accelerate the need for teachers because content doesn't write itself. These bots do not author things from such that it's compelling for a person to learn them. That task remains in the human domain. These bots just remove all of the pain of trying to connect everyone to each other at the right time. That connection, in my opinion, is going to increase the need for educational institutions and the people that make them tick.
Well, yeah, I definitely see how the use of AI and machine learning can be a real support for our teachers out there, even the focus on specific student needs and specific student learning styles as well. And so I wanted to say, first, because at the top of the hour, I want to be real respectful of all of our participants' times as well. Richard and Ken, thank you so much for taking this time to explain what you're doing over there at Tanjo. Very fascinating. Hopefully, some of our participants will reach out to you to get to learn more. For those that were attendees here, thank you so much for your effort. I hope this was useful, and I hope it was informative for you, and I hope that you're going to go back to your colleges and just think about, your environment there of how machine learning and artificial intelligence can be beneficial for your students or your institutional success. We will be putting out a recorded version of this. About 24 hours we'll be sending out live access to it. And once again, thank you for your time. And, be checking your emails for further webinars that we'll be sending out to the Bellwether College Consortium. Have a great rest of your day, and best of luck with everything you're doing.
Thanks so much, everyone.